Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. And then it was all over. The Cheltenham Festival, it's been and gone. And we say it every year because that's what we come to expect at the Cheltenham Festival. But this year, the storylines were so heartwarming, so moving, that hour on Tuesday, so scintillating. We have to talk about it. Obviously, this podcast is always here designed to preview the best of the action over the course of the weekend and get our nap and our next bet selections from Collins and Ross Millar. But we will make the most of this opportunity to talk about what happened last week. We've just left, I feel, with a real spring in our step as we head towards that very season. And I think we really needed it after the political issues, the fairly depressing headlines that the sport has dealt with. The horses did the talking. Too many moments to mention. We've got some winners as well. Really pleased that Ross and Tom can talk us through their highlights. Obviously, Constitution Hill and Honeysuckle. But what else? Ross, let's start with you. This was a week where we can really remind ourselves just why we love this sport.
Yeah, good people winning races is always a nice angle. I think there was a couple of fairly misguided comments Cheltenham week and then this week as well with owners. So the likes of Henry de Bromhead and John Kiley, who Tom mentioned on the pre-pod, who just spoke with such love and passion for the sport and with such a nice outlook about nurturing jockeys, nurturing horses. For me, that's what draws me in. You know, I've said before, I love this sport because I love horses firstly, I love racing second, and I love gambling third. And I know that's not everyone's order of things, but for me, it was absolutely a week that showcased the horse, showcased the jockeys. I think they've got to take huge plaudits for being able to adapt so quickly to what I don't think are bad set of rules. I think it was really badly implicated at the wrong time. I thought they did brilliantly, really, and I thought I would defy anyone to say that the racing wasn't as competitive as it was the year before.
Yeah, agreed. And look, and that came down in the rulings and obviously the fact that there weren't too many massive incidents that came out of it from a jockey's point of view. But yeah, the horses, the sport really came out on top, didn't it, TC? Like, we always talk every year about the Irish and the UK battle for the titles, how many winners the Irish are going to get, how many winners is Willie Mullins going to get. But I felt like that took a bit of a back step because as Ross was mentioning, it was more about those smaller stories, the smaller men. It was for the real good guys, and it's for the things that. And it gave us the opportunity to really think about the whole sport as a whole, not just about the every year-on-year battles, which can get a little bit dull.
Yeah, well, Ireland v Britain is always the talking point, isn't it? How badly Britain are doing, how brilliantly the Ireland are doing in the Prestbury Cup standings. But as you say, it was limitedly shown on TV, which is fantastic. My main takeaway, aside from the fantastic stories, one of which Ross has touched on there, with John Kiley, with the dream to share in the bumper, also Honeysuckle, of course, is the fact that we now have two superstars just to carry our jumps racing in Constitution Hill and Galopin des Champs. We already knew that Constitution Hill had what it took to be the superstar, the horse to take this sport to the next level. But Galopin des Champs also proved that he has that X factor by winning the Cheltenham Gold Cup. I think these two, both in the infancy of their career, could leapfrog horse racing above other sports in industry and punting and just people who love sport in general. Maybe they'll turn on ITV more often from now on.
Yeah, look, well, we'll discuss this now because Constitution Hill could be the Frankel, and very much is looking to be the sort of the Frankel, the national hunt scene, really gathering a following, really looking explosive. What we were lucky to see last week was no short of breathtaking, which we've come accustomed to, haven't we? And Ross, I think we're lucky that Constitution Hill is owned by a man who's very creative. He's up for it. He loves this game and he wants to see his horse thrive. And a lot of pundits, a lot of fans, a lot of specialists are saying you should keep to the hurdling route because he's clearly such a good hurdler. But you can understand why the temptation is there to go novice chasing, to potentially one day become a Gold Cup horse. Could we see him against Galopin des Champs? You can see both sides of it. If you were Michael Buckley, what would you be doing?
I mean, firstly, I just can't help smile when you talk about it, which I think is exactly what T's seeing. TC's saying it really does excite people. My answer is the same. What I would like to see him do, and what I think they will do, and what I would do if he was mine. And for me, the Cheltenham Gold Cup is the race. If you've got a horse that your trainer and your jockey and your eyes are telling you has a conceivable chance of one day contesting it, and contesting it competitively, I think most people would take that option. Yes, there is probably a greater perceived risk to him in terms of injury, jumping fences and jumping hurdles. But I think they're a chasing yard. He's an ambitious, adventurous owner, and I would be surprised if they don't at least test the waters and try. Now, the first step for that is going to be trying him over some fences at home at Seven Barrows. I think we can assume that if novice chasing is not mentioned, we can all assume that doesn't go well. His leap at the last, for me, is double-edged. It shows that he's got stacks and stacks of scope, but it does show that he's a bit brave. Now, he's going to need to not be as brave over a fence, because you don't get away with that sort of mistake at a fence, but he does seem intelligent. We've seen plenty of horses. I mean, Dysart Dynamo, for example, has been a much better jumper of a fence than he was a hurdle, because he respects them more. He's not as brave. So I would be surprised if novice chasing wasn't tried. Lots of people have said, put him in the Gold Cup, put him in the Queen Mother Champion chase. I think that is next season, any price you like. I mean, I just cannot see Nicky Henderson doing that for all the money. I mean, I don't think do you want to take on a Galopin Des Champs in his prime? I mean, you watch that Gold Cup back, they're walking over the line. He canters all the way to the top of the hill where they pull up. He wasn't tired. So I don't think you'd want to be taking him on as a novice. So I think it'll be a route either to the Arkle or to the Turners. My gut says the Arkle, because I think that's a more exciting race to win than the Turners. But I can see the logic of stepping him out and trip up to 2.5 over fences as a novice with one eye on the 2025 Gold Cup. But yeah, I mean, what you can guarantee is that Michael Buckley will listen to Nicky Henderson. There won't be any owner-led plans here. It'll be the owner listening to the man who he's employed as the expert, and that's what we'll do. But I really hope it's fence. I think that's an exciting chapter to go on to.
Yeah, look, it's pretty surreal that a horse of this nature could be such a short price for 5 individual races next year at the Cheltenham Festival. Even money for the champion hurdle, around 5-2 to 4-1 for the Arkle. The novices Turner's novices chase, the same sort of price. The Brown Advisory a bit bigger, and then, as you say, an open race like the Queen Mother Champion chase, he's around 6-1 to 10-1 for those races. It just goes to show the level of respect that bookmakers have for him whatever he decides to do. We can hopefully post Aintree, because that's where he's next going to go to. Stepping up and trip from then on, we can enjoy coming up with the ideas and waiting to see what we'll unveil. But as you say, Galopin Des Champs as well, whatever he ends up doing, and they're both relatively young, only 6 Constitution Hill and Galopin Des Champs 7. Tom, there were lots of stories, a lot of horses as well that potentially might not have won, a lot of maybe some that we might have missed, some eye catches. 28 races, there's a huge amount of things that need to go right. There needs to be so much luck in your hands. We saw the likes of Marlon Mission looking like everything was in his hands until falling a couple from the final at in the National Hunt Chase. There were plenty of stories. I'm sure there are horses that you're going to keep on side of. I'm sure there are horses that you were delighted to see win. The likes of Jim Cheshire, one that you were really keen on for the bumper, where he might go next. Are there a couple that you wanted to highlight now as ones that you really took away from the festival?
Yeah, so I wrote an article for betting.getsbk.com. So if you've already read that, then apologies, this is duplication. But there were 5 eye catchers in that article, 2 of which I'm going to mention now on the podcast. And if you haven't checked out the article, please do. The first is Walking on Air, who ran in the Potemps, finished 5th for Nicky Henderson. He just got shuffled back at 2 crucial stages of the race. All of his best forms come on good ground, and obviously the ground wasn't good at Cheltenham. It was soft. And yet he still finished 5th. He was also squeezed up turning for home when looking like he was going to make a challenge. He could go towards Aintree for the 3-mile, half a furlong handicap hurdle that Nicky Henderson tends to target with horses who previously ran in the Potemps final. So put Walking on Air in your tracker. And the other one is Home by the Lee. He made the worst mistake over a hurdle that I've seen at this year's Cheltenham Festival at the 6th flight, just as they passed the stands for the first time. Completely lost his back end and did remarkably well to stand up. Yet this horse, he would have had excuses to finish right at the back. He'd have had excuses to be pulled up, but he still finished 5th, and a close finish in 5th as well, only 3 3/4 lengths behind the eventual winner. I thought he ran an exceptional race. I don't know where he's going to be seen next. Maybe he'll race in the spring, either Punchestown or maybe even Aintree. But this horse has a lot of ability, and he could be the standout in the Stayers hurdle division moving forward.
Yeah, funny old Stayers, wasn't it? Sard Burley. There were a couple of shrewd men that did tip him up, but I did not see that coming, and seemingly enjoys Cheltenham more than anything because he puts in a lot of terrible rounds of jumping and displays outside of that. That was a really extraordinary race in the end. Thank you for those. A couple to take on, but also worth having a read of your article for the full review. Ross, any from you? And also for that respect, we've touched on jockeys. It's a coming of age moment, isn't it? We saw Michael O'Sullivan, 2 winners. What a talent he is, and also the smaller trainers getting a big days in the sunshine.
Yeah. So in terms of horses in the immediacy. I thought the Ballymore form is going to work out really, really well. I thought that was probably the best novice of the week, in my opinion. I think Champ Kylie was second, Gaelic Warrior were third. They're likely to go to Punchestown now. Going back right-handed will suit them. Champ Kylie over 2.5. Gaelic Warrior, I think they might well step him up in trip. I think they're 2 you'd want to keep on side. And then, there was plenty of good jockey performances last week. In terms of coming of age, and he's not coming of age because he's had Cheltenham winners before, but I just thought that the last 2 days of the festival had done Harry Cobden the world of good. I thought he was pretty moderate the first 2 days. Came in on Hermes Allen and complained that the pace was muddling on a horse that he's made the running on before. I thought that was churlish, basically. And I thought, as I'd mentioned in the podcast, I just thought he got a bit bullied. But then Thursday, the ride on Stage Star, and then the ride on Stay Away Faye the next day, on the new course, he rides that course really, really well. He rode his own fractions, dictated the race how he liked, and got the results. And then was brilliant on Brave Man's Game, who I think we have to put our hands up. I mean, that horse has baffled me all season long. They've done a brilliant job to win a King George, then go to the Gold Cup and serve it up to a really good horse. Again, was in the right place at the right time. Boxed Sam Ewing in coming around the turn. He rode brilliantly, and I think going into the festival next year, he can perhaps look around the weighing room and really believe that he's as good as anyone in there, because he is. So I thought that was probably my takeout was Harry Cobden, particularly on the new course.
Yeah, TC, just quickly on that, Brave Man's Game deserted him a little bit. We'll be doing so next time. Like, he definitely caught me massively. I have to say, I was not expecting that. The jumping round, that was the best of all the horses in the Gold Cup. He jumped the best, didn't he?
Yeah, 100%. There were a fair few that made mistakes, though. Even Galopin Des Champs didn't jump overly well, albeit a couple of people on my Twitter timeline think he did. He made a lot of mistakes, especially one with 4th last or 3rd last as well. Brave Man's Game was impeccable. I know, and I've heard your interview with Paul Nicholls at Kempton subsequently, and I know plenty believe Brave Man's Game did stay the trip, but I think he was found out in the last furlong. Racing's all about opinions. If you disagree, put that to good use next time he runs in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. But I will be opposing him at Cheltenham and backing him in the King George next year.
Well, I'm not sure if you listened to the interview I did with Harry Cobden just afterwards. He said that he was lying in bed the night before thinking, we would have won the Ryanair. So there we go.
Conflated would have as well. And I had 22-1 on him. Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was just there's so much to pick apart. We could be here for hours. I think for me, look, I've had quite an easy time and we've had 18 minutes in. But yeah, Jerry Colombe, I'm still not quite over that. I don't know what went on. I don't know. Just bizarre run. There was a couple of bizarre runs. Shishkin was a bizarre run. Jerry Colombe sort of came. I thought we were going to have a champ moment for a second. I still think this is a very, very good horse. We'll see. Next year it's going to be a lot harder for him. I can't see in the open division it's going to be tough with those guys, the bigger guys, the likes of Galopin Des Champs. Let's see where he ends up next time out. I'm sure it'll be at Punchestown, but I still have faith in him. I did think that Santos and Davis gave the real whacker an absolute belter from the front, and that was a great performance. But outside of that, a Plutard, I tipped him for the Gold Cup, and despite him pulling up, he was travelling really well. They were really pleased with that. Henry de Bromhead had a great week all around, and I think a Plutard, he just got an absolute nightmare when all the fallers came down in front of him, and it just got him out the race. But the bowl at Aintree coming up, if he's up against the likes of Conflated and Clan de Zabo, I think that's going to be his race. I think it's also a nice track for him. So Plutard, and also In the Pocket, who was in the wrong race, but ran a brilliant race in the Supreme. We'll see him hopefully stepping up and tripping on an intermediate distance that he definitely needs in one of the later spring festivals. Okay, but that's enough of our Cheltenham review. We need to move on to the weekend. Slightly bit of a lull at this weekend and over the next couple of weeks before we head into Aintree, but it's that moment where TC gets really excited and revved up because we are closely moving towards the start of the flat turf season. It is the beginning of the turf season in Ireland. We've got the Irish Lincoln, we've got the UK version weekend after, but we do have racing at Newbury, and we're going to focus on the handicap chase, the 205. 10 runners line up in the 0 to 150 handicap, where bit of a muddle. I think at this stage of the season, and Ross, I'll go with you first, that because we've had such a strange period of weather, sort of waiting for horses, waiting for the ground to get right. I don't know what it will be like at Newbury. They could get quite soft testing conditions, which we haven't had in a while. There'd be plenty of horses that thought it would be more sort of connections that they thought would be sort of spring ground and the like. So it's quite difficult to work out what we're sort of getting at this stage of the season, when normally we're sort of expecting spring ground runners. How have you sort of assessed this race and the sort of the weekend in general from a national hunt perspective?
Well, I had to screw up my work and start again, Jess, because I've been waltzing around doing some spring jobs outside in a t-shirt over here, and then suddenly it occurred to me that maybe I ought to look at what the weather was doing with you guys. And looking on the weather report I like to use, which is normally pretty accurate, suggests there could be 10 mil of rain on good to soft ground. I think you're looking at soft ground, and that's the angle I've taken. I think it's a really open race, and it's not one that I'll be wading into. I think you have to mention Zaguli and Eden Dahu, who finished first and second at Sandown just 2 weeks ago on similarly testing conditions. Eden Dahu loves soft ground, but he is a yo-yo horse. If ever there's one, he's just up, he's down. I mean, you just don't quite know what you're going to get with him. Seems to go well after wind surgery. They're weighted to get quite close to each other again, but I thought they finished very, very tired here, and I'd be worried that would leave a mark on them. Riders on the Storm entered my calculations. He's a horse I just have an affinity with and a love for. I love how he goes about his business. He set far too hard a fractions at Ascot last time over 3 miles in the first time blinkers. Speaking to owner and trainer on a YouTube piece I did, they were really keen to try and sneak him into the Grand Annual, and he got to second reserve and didn't get a run. Because they'd looked at the fractions he'd run pretty hard, pretty quick, and they thought he might have been suited to that test as the ground came up soft. Didn't get in. They've obviously come here and they revert to a visor from blinkers, again, something different. I'd give him a chance, but just slightly concerned that having had a plan and then rerouting to another plan isn't always ideal. So the one I've come down on is the Heather Main trained Numitor, who's a horse I really like. He hasn't won at Newbury, but he's run some really good races in probably more competitive competition than this. He slipped now from a mark of 142, which was way above his capabilities, down to a mark of 135. Hasn't won off a mark this high, but I thought his run last time was full of promise. He is going to love the soft ground, and I think plenty in here won't. Tom Scudamore got on really well with him, and I think Adam Wedge is a similar style of jockey to Tom Scudamore, so I'm hoping he will pick up the mantle now that Tom has gone. I just think Newbury soft ground, getting back to soft ground, having been running quite well on good soft ground, will suit this horse, and in an open race, his odds appeal to me, and let's hope that at least we get each way on 3 places. Yeah,
he's a horse that they don't run. Heather Main doesn't run a huge amount. They sort of pick and choose quite carefully, don't they? Also, second run after wind surgery clearly must have helped a little bit last time out. And he's around 14 to 1, so it's definitely not bad each way value for this kind of race. Thank you for that, Ross. TC, we'll need to, when we look at these handicaps on a Saturday, have to mention the obvious sort in the skeleton, the Cheltenham, who's the sort of unexposed novice in a race of this nature, has to raise his game again, is being very progressive, ticks all the boxes. Is he your selection?
He's not. I think I've got a bit of a grudge with this horse, I have to say, because I backed him 3 runs back at Southwell in a really weak handicap hurdle and he got beat. He wasn't given the best ride, but he finished second. And I haven't backed him the last twice when he's won. So I don't think I can get involved now. He's up another £7 into a better race. Potentially the ground will find him out as well. For such a wide open race, it's interesting that us 3 have all come down on just 2 horses. I'm going to preview the horse that you're going to talk about in good detail in a minute as well. But firstly, Numitor was the first on my shortlist at a massive price, and very much for the reason that Ross has already said. The return to Newbury, I think Newbury is his number 1 track. Soft ground will definitely suit. Second time off a wind operation, and also coming off a layoff as well. I think if this is the day for Numitor, then he's going to run well at a big price in a competitive race. And the other one is Super 6, because he is the unexposed and lightly raced performer in this field. The return to a left-handed track clearly helped him last time out, where he jumped so much better. And if he could take another step forward, maybe he can win this race. Saying this, I won't be having a bet on the race. I want to come clean about that because I'm flat only now until Aintree. So, just Super 6 and Numitor were the 2 that stood out to me.
Yeah, and I've got to echo that. Super 6, I was really impressed by his jumping last time out. The Twiston Davises clearly have worked on that, and I think he probably would have been worth a good bit better in some of his races before if he had sort of just jumped a lot better. He has gone up a good bit in the weight, £9 rise, a fair rise, but things are just clicking into gear. He's got to back up the performance. I think going around this kind of track, similar to enough in the way that they go around to Haydock, will help. Sam Twiston-Davies riding really well. Like to see Sam giving him a positive ride out in front, and I think he could get closer to Honor de Jonec, who he was behind the last time. Have to always have a word for Mezid as a bow, because he's a grand horse who's gone through a rigmarole of problems, and to get him to win last time out by Alan King and the team is a huge effort. But he's a kind of horse that can put in a big run and then might just be feeling things a little bit. So difficult to follow in, but he's a horse that has been a really good training performance by Adam King to sort of get him back from lots of issues. So Numitor 14-1 and Super 6 11-2 in a very open looking handicap chase at Newbury. Okay, well, we've got, as I mentioned, the beginning of the flat turf season over in Ireland. There's also a small business of the Dubai World Cup night over in Meydan, which has got plenty of horses that have been on many people's radars over the course of the winter period. I'm sure TC, you've been following this. This is a good renewal of the Dubai World Cup from all races. It's always cracking entertainment. Might not be for everyone, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Obviously, we've got, as I mentioned, flat action over in Ireland. We've got plenty of other jump racing, but TC, I'll come to you first and get where your next best selection is over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, well, I was desperate to nap in the Dubai World Cup. I really was. But the draw was made yesterday on Wednesday. We're filming this on Thursday around lunchtime. And unfortunately, all 3 market leaders have been drawn right out in the car park, which puts me off having a bet in the race. I will say, though, that I'll be laying Country Grammar. I know he was impressive in this race 12 months ago, but at the same time, was it 12 months ago or 2 years ago? Whenever he won this race. But at the same time, he's drawn out in 13. He's a horse that lacks tactical speed, and he's just going to take so much kickback. The only way to avoid that kickback is by going wide on the track, and you just lose so much ground out there. So I think his task is made ridiculously harder in the Dubai World Cup. So I've left that race, but I will be napping at Meydan. And the nap's going to come in the Golden Shaheen at 2:25. And I think the Japanese are going to have a phenomenal day in Dubai. And I think they'll win this race with Lemon Pop. Now, I know that there was an interview with Godolphin's Japanese representative earlier today, and he wasn't overly keen about the chances of Lemon Pop, but I think he's wrong. I think this horse is the horse to beat. He was really, really impressive last time in the Grade 1 February Stakes. Now, I'm not going to profess to know a load about Japanese racing because I don't, but I did watch a couple of his replays back on YouTube, and he was so impressive last time. He just stalked the speed, moved up alongside the leaders and kicked clear in the style of a really good horse. that came over a longer trip. He's dropping back on Saturday, which could be a negative, but at the same time, he has that tactical early pace that can get him into a good position. If he's banged there, maybe 1-2 lengths behind the leaders with a furlong to go, I think he'll run them down and win the Golden Shaheen. There are a couple of US raiders in that race, actually, that I should briefly mention. Gunite being one who ran second in the Riyadh Dirt Sprint last time out. He's a very good horse, but I don't know, he has his limitations. He'll go forward and try to make the most of the early pace, but I think he's going to be vulnerable late on. And the other one is Hopkins for Bob Baffert. If that horse wins, then I'm giving up the game. And my next best is going to come over in Ireland in the 2:15 at the Curragh, and it's a horse called Swift Flight. Now, this 5 furlong handicap has been won by a lot of specialists in the past, and the majority are returning again to try and win it once more. Laugh a Minute won it last year, and he's been teed up for the race in similar fashion by having a little prep run at Dundalk. He's definitely a danger. There's another horse in here as well that's a danger at a bigger price, but only a 5-year-old, and that's John Riggins for the Lynhams. He's a horse that will move through the field, stalk and try pounce late, but he's been vulnerable in his first run back off a layoff before. So I think he's for the tracker. He's the horse for the future, but maybe not for this race. The one I'm siding with is Swift Flight. He finished second in this race last year, but was given so much to do. He was right out the back, tried to make a late run and just couldn't pull back Laugh a Minute, who eventually won the race. He's probably been prepped for this once again. He's good off a layoff. He's drawn very well in stall 2. And if you're having bet in sprint races at the Curragh on Saturday, you want to be drawn low because the far side tends to be the place to be.
Brilliant. Yeah, and also a word on the ground, soft to heavy at the moment, and with the rain coming over here in the UK, I'd imagine it's probably might be the same in Ireland as well. So very testing surfaces to begin the tough season. But thank you. Something from Maidan and something from over in Ireland at the Curragh as well for the beginning of the flat season for TC. Ross, what is your nap for the flat action?
So the flat action, the Maidan action, no surprise. I'm sticking to the jumps for as long as I possibly can. The nap is in the 2:33 at Bangor, which has got a really nice card actually on Saturday. And I was really excited when you get that ping, ping, ping on your phone and your tracker's going off saying these horses are declared to run. And there was about 7 or 8, 3 of them in the same race and 2 of them in the same race. So that narrowed it fairly quickly. But a horse I do like in the 2:33 is 223 for Sam Alwood. Now he was second off a mark of 150, or third, so I should say, off a mark of 115 just 11 months ago over this course and distance. Since Moose Stables, 3 runs have been pretty disappointing before he stepped back last time. First run after a wind-up and finished second at Doncaster. The third horse, Hawthorne Cottage, won yesterday really impressively. And I just think he's got a chance of getting back to his best now. He'll like this slightly softer ground. Sam Alwood's yard have been in dire form all year, but just the last 14 days to 3 weeks, they've started to run a little bit better, still without a winner and a couple pulling up, but they've tended to pull up at massive prices, and a lot of them are going much better and outrunning their odds. He's now down to a mark of 103 from 115, like I said, just 11 months ago. I think course and distance will suit him. Second run back after a wind-up. I expect him to bounce back to form and perhaps kick Sam Alwood's season on to a better finish. And then the next best comes up at Kelso in the 4:45, and it's a horse called Bollinger and Crook, who I know really well. He's out of a sister to a mare that I've got. He was a decent hurdler and connections, and therefore myself were very excited to see him go over fences because I thought he might do quite a nice job on the mare's page. And he was really disappointing in his initial tries chasing. Didn't manage to add a victory to his form. Then went back hurdling and hadn't looked like he was particularly in love with the game. Went back chasing last time at Kelso, and honest to God, it's one of the best rounds of jumping you will ever watch in your life. He winged every single fence under Derek Fox, never saw another rival. Beat a horse called Gandhi Maker, who was going for a hat-trick and was very well gambled on the day. Beat him easily. He's up £8, back over this course and distance. There doesn't look to be a huge threat to the pace up front. If Derek Fox can get to the front again and crucially get him in that jumping rhythm again, £8 is definitely not going to stop him. He's a horse they thought a lot of. You know, he's featured a couple of times in her sort of pre-seasons previews in the Racing Post and such like. And you know, you've got to take notice of that. She talks about him being a powerful jumper and going to be a better chase than hurdler. Well, he won off a mark of 108 over hurdles. So this mark of 108 over fences shouldn't stop him. And so he's the next best in the 4.45 at Kelso.
Brilliant. Yes. What a wonderful combination that is as well, and seen to really good effect last week too. So thank you for that, Bollender and Krug, and 223 Napa next best for Ross. And then mine, well, I'm going to stick to Meydan, and I agree with TC. Look, the Japanese are an absolute force to be reckoned with internationally. They have 5 winners at this meeting this time last year. They cleaned up at Saudi. They did very well at the Breeders' Cup, and they just get their horses absolutely spot on. My nap, I was slightly tentative only because of question mark over the trip, but I think Barat Leon in the 12.05, so that's the first race on the card, which is the Godolphin Mile. I think this is possibly an easier race than the turf sprint was that he won last time out at Saudi. He does need to find an extra furlong, and he's not massively proven over the trip, but I think that I think it's an easier task at hand than the race he had last time out. And I think that the Japanese will again decide to make most of him, make use of him from the front, coming out of stall 8, which is not too bad. He's sort of more in a middle position with 14 runners. So that is my nap. And then my next best, very difficult. Again, same as TC. You don't want to be too wide at Meydan. And unfortunately, my next best, which is Rebels Romance, has got a wide draw. He is in stall 10. But at around about 7-1 for the Tsushima Classic, a horse that was unstoppable last year, ended it on a high, winning the Breeders' Cup Turf. Rebels Romance has been slightly overlooked in the betting. Yes, it's his first run after a bit of a break. It's a brilliant race with the likes of Equinox, Mostadaf and Westover. Slightly on a bit of a watching brief with Westover this year. We'll see how he'll begin his season. Mostadaf was brilliant last time out in Dubai. He might be the one that, in Saudi. He might be one they've all got to beat, but such a big win can always leave a bit of a mark on horses. And I like a bit of a fresh one in the likes of Rebels Romance, despite a big draw. And that's probably what has made his price what it is. So that's Meydan. Really looking forward to that card. Obviously got racing throughout the country, over in Ireland as well. We are creeping ever closer to the flat season, so you're going to have to get out your flat form books, Ross, and start thinking about it a little bit as we edge close to that. But we look forward to coming back next week and reviewing what we've seen, hopefully a few winners, and our next week's racing as well. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for enjoying all of our preview podcasts for the Cheltenham Festival. TC and Ross did an excellent job previewing each day throughout the course of the week and reviewing what they saw. It's great to see so many new listeners. So hopefully you can enjoy the rest of this jump season into the flat season. A reminder also that if you are a new SBK customer, you can get £10 in free bets by betting £10. Season Cs always apply. Like, subscribe, tell all your friends. We're back every single week with the smiling faces of Ross Millar and Tom Collins. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.